In this lesson, we're going to continue creating the dynamics part of this animation. Now that we have the kind of triggers we're going to use for it, we need to just make one final adjustment. You can see that it kind of, the tips of these catch up with the spheres too quickly as they go around because the curve is much longer here. We extended those out so we could have that straight line here. And so we just need to change the timing. Let's select both of these pieces of geometry here, and then we can just take these last two keyframes of both of them and just slide them back so they're not catching up too quickly with the spheres. Looks like we need to scale that one back even more. So I'm just trying to make sure they're the same distance away from the spheres. So now when we play them back, they should finish, because we got the start working pretty good, but we didn't do the finish yet. So now they look like, yeah, the ends, the back end of the both of those are hitting the spheres about the same time. So that works pretty well. But keep in mind, you know, we had this 150 idea that these were going to start at 150. So when we moved the end, it adjusted the beginning as well. So because we don't have a keyframe on this beginning one, I'm just going to hit I here and middle mouse click in the graph editor just to make sure on frame 150 that keyframe no longer moves. It's going to start right there no matter what we do to the end frame. So I want to do that to this one as well. I'll select the curve, hold down I, and middle mouse click on the curve, and then pull that up so it's just about touching. And let's make sure that doesn't affect the end too much, which it did. Again, for the same reason, like we need keyframes where we want it to definitely end, which is around about where the spheres end. So let's set a keyframe here, because all this is being timed based off of kind of where the spheres are. So I mean, that one was pretty close. This one's way off. So let's get that. Select the curve, hold down I, middle mouse click, and then bring it back. Cool. So now it should start 150, and it should end when the spheres are done. The tail end of this thing should go through when the spheres are done. So let's go to the mesh editor, the main mesh waiter that we're working on, and let's choose dynamics, add dynamics node. And now the fun begins in the more complicated section. I know a lot of this is complicated, but dynamics can be a little bit, so we'll try to simplify it. Basically, we need to select the bullet solver, which is, you know, solving for the simulation, and we need to make sure the start frame is where we want it. And remember, we said 150, so we'll enter 150. I'm going to increase the collision iterations just so it has more to work with, and I'm going to increase the internal frame rate just so it has more frames to work with to calculate the simulation. So those are the two things, well, really three things I'm going to adjust: start frame and then those two, which will affect the quality. Now, the next thing we need to do is to go to the per point adjustment on the dynamics node here. So I'm going to select it from the mesh editor. I'm going to scroll down until I see the per points adjustment, and I'm going to right click and click create, and then I'm going to double click on that. And the channel name that we want to affect is active, because we want these things to trigger when each of these cubes become active for the dynamics to begin, right? So basically, before these cones come in to interact with them, they will not be active. Okay, so we need to attach this fall off object to this same thing that we did before, right? We're going to have two fall off objects. Instead of affecting the color, now we're affecting when the simulation becomes active on a per object basis, right? It's not the whole thing. It's each one of these cubes are we going to come affected. If you see, you know, it's in the name, per point adjustment, right? If you think about it logically, this is what's happening. We're making per point adjustments, because when you do a rigid body simulation, that's actually, it's just figuring out where the center point is of the object and putting a point there, and then it creates its own hull around that, and it based on the collision shape you choose. Right now it's automatic. We could say box because we know for sure they're all boxes, but you might, if it was a different shape of an object, you might want to choose mesh. It's more time intensive to calculate, but because it's, there's just more going on to a mesh that has all these different shapes. But luckily we've simplified it. We just have boxes. So based on this a points location with a collision shape of a box, it is going to simulate it. And so we want to have per point adjustments of each one of those box locations that comprise this voxelized logo. Okay, so now we have the per point adjustment attribute assigned. We've assigned it the channel name active, meaning when does it activate the simulation. And it's going to be based off of the fall-off object that we're going to assign as a mesh. And we're going to put in the cone, the first one. We're going to go back to that and add another one, same thing that we did before. So on channel shape random 2, choose mesh. I'm going to choose the second cone for the input, the shape in. So same idea, we have a custom shape radius, which we can affect, but let's just play this back and see what we have right this second. So it looks like it's working. You can see all of these are starting to fall down based on the position of this cone. I'm going to turn off deformers so we don't have to look at those lattice, the lattice shapes there. So we have the simulation starting, but basically it's working. The only thing that I would say that we need to adjust now is the randomness. If we look at this, and go ahead and pause here, you can see this is happening in a very straight line kind of effect. So we need to adjust the random strength in the per point attribute adjustment that we created. So let's click into that, and we need to adjust the random strength. So let's do something like 0.4 to start with. Let's just play that back and see what we get. So see how it's not a straight line now. The only other problem now is that it's too random and it's not actually picking up all the cubes that we want it to. So we need to that's why I'm saying we need to animate this thing to be a higher value, or we can let's just start with a higher value and see if we can capture some more of those cubes. Yeah, that looks a lot better. The other thing we can do is add these to the playback display layer here. So I just have those selected, and I'm adding the selected objects, and I'm going to turn off P. So now when I play back, we won't see those. So we can get a better idea of how this is actually working. So that's working a lot better than the previous random strength iteration, but you can see that it is now starting to not make sense because these are getting stuck behind. So that's why I say we need to animate this random strength value over time, so that after it initially starts, it looks random, but then it's just a free-for-all. It's all coming down. So I'm going to select dynamics to get to the per point adjustment that we made. And at 150, I'm going to have the random strength be, let's just have an even number of 0.7. I'm going to set a keyframe. I'm going to go maybe, let's see, 20, it's maybe 30 frames. And then I'm going to have this to be 1. And I'm going to set a key just to make sure. But we can see the 2 keyframes here, so that for sure did it. Set those keyframes. I'm going to play this back. Spring ends there, like we talked about in the other lesson. Randomization of that initiation. Now it all starts to really go as it gets closer to this 1 value. So the only problem here, and I keep forgetting about this, is the add. We need to do the add value here on the add mode. because we want it to continue to be active, right? If you think about it, we don't want it to just only be active when the cone is around it, which, I mean, you could do if that's your own creative decision. But for our purposes, we want this to add as it goes along. It needs to keep adding. Anytime it activates a cube, it needs to stay activated. So we want the fall off mode to be add on the fall off objects. So now when we play it back, these should continue to fall. And as it gets closer to 1, so the only thing I'm seeing right now is the fact that it kind of picked up this lower, let me hide our original one, because it's kind of getting in the way now. It grabbed the lower edge of this. So let's play this back and see. I'm going to try to pause it so we can see. I don't want this lower one going yet. This lower row. So that's all fine. Okay, right here. Okay, stop. So it looks like the problem is it's going to be the custom shape of this fall off object. So what I can do is go into dynamics, get to this fall off object. I can't remember if this is, which one is this? Number 2. So we can go into the number 2 fall off and we can see, yeah, P cone shape 2. So we know it is this cone shape. And we just can reduce the custom shape radius to maybe like 0.7 and play this back and see if it doesn't avoid picking up this bottom row of the C letter here. That's what I'm trying to avoid. So we have a nice random breakup here, and then it all starts going. Okay, it's still grabbing that lower row. Not as bad, but we need to reduce this number even more. Let's do like 0.5 and play this back. Okay, so far so good. Yeah, that's pretty good. It doesn't pick up that bottom row. It's leaving a few behind here, but I'm not too worried about that because it starts to get super crazy in here. And we have all this amazing animation happening. How cool is that? All right, so in this lesson, I mean, pretty quickly, even though it's a little bit complicated, it's actually one of the shorter lessons we've done. We have the dynamic simulation happening, and it's all working pretty well. So in the next lessons, we're going to start to finalize this and start looking at rendering it and adjusting a few of those attributes and shaders and the look that we want to give it. But yeah, that is the dynamics, how to do dynamics with Mesh and have a lot of control over it. You know, really quickly, we kind of built up, you know, using motion paths. We already knew that. Now we're using them in different ways as fall off objects. Now we're using them as a per point adjustment on a dynamic simulation. It's pretty advanced stuff. And it doesn't really get that much more advanced, to be honest, as far as Mesh goes. There's a lot of different other tools you can jump into, but as far as like taking the, you know, fall off object as far as it goes or dynamics, that's pretty far along. There's different constraints, and there's a ton more. You could have about like 20 more massive courses on just Mesh, but I wanted to show you on a project basis, like, how does this work? And also the creative decisions I'm making. Why am I choosing to voxelize this? Why am I choosing to add, you know, this secondary offset up here to add another dimension of motion in it? And so I just want to walk you through not just where to press the buttons, but what am I thinking? Why am I doing what am I doing? You know, and the questions you need to ask yourself and the decisions that you need to make when you're making your own 3D logo animation. And, you know, with Mesh, there's just so many options. Any point along this course, you could have veered off and done your own thing or did, you know, adjust something different. I encourage you to do that. Start experimenting, adding your own flavor into this. That's the whole point. If you just copy exactly what I'm doing, you're not going to learn. You need to, you know, do what I'm doing, follow along, then make mistakes, do different things, figure out why is it not working this way, you know, dig deep on this stuff. It's an advanced topic, and to really master it, you got to take ownership over it and, you know, add your own flair to it and not just follow me paint by numbers kind of a thing or any tutorial. I don't encourage you to do that. This is purely to expose you to the tools and the different possibilities to use them creatively, but then it's up to you to take this information and run with it and make it your own. And so in the next few lessons, again, we'll start to cover kind of finishing this up and rendering it, and I will see you there. Thanks for watching.